got to change my talk, don't I? Okay. No, you don't remember the talk, you just remember me showing up last year. Charlie over here brought it from Caroline County, brought his wife this year with him. Anybody else bring their wife? I brought, okay, good. That's a good thing. All right. Coy Harville from my home county of Pennsylvania County is sitting beside his wife and not sure if he brought her or not. Does that tell you the state of confusion we have in Pennsylvania County? See, it's not just your county. You thought it was, right? I am delighted to be here with my Pennsylvania County cohorts. James Sneed is the chair of our board. Coy Harville serves. Brenda Bowman is my personal Board of Supervisors member. And Tim Barber is not here. He had to go back. Okay, well, let's not vote for him again, then, shall we? Okay, because he didn't stay for the entire VACO meeting, right? Okay. In fact, I recently have begun a term of service for my county, serving on our IDA board. So I go to my Board of Supervisors meeting, and they're going to vote on me. Brenda wants to introduce me. I get there, and she says, he really needs no introduction, and I'm thinking, why am I here? Because, you know, Board of Supervisors meetings are, shall we say, less than riveting oftentimes. And then she introduces me, and then my chair of my Board of Supervisors in my county, Pennsylvania County in Virginia, says, yes, I know Dr. Joey, but I'm going to vote for him anyway. You thought you got no respect, right? Then the IDA canceled the first meeting. And James walks up to me this morning and says, oh, they canceled the meeting because you're on the board now. My first foray into politics, and this is the kind of respect I get. James, I'm so glad you're here today. But next year when I'm here, let's send you back and keep Tim, shall we? Would that be okay? All right. I understand your theme this year is, oh, wait, Jim Campbell. Did Jim make it back in the room? Oh, Jim, okay. I come from an era of politics in which we trust but verify. Anybody remember that era of politics besides me? Mm-hmm. Jim Campbell tells me that since my birthday was yesterday, that at the banquet last evening, the group sang happy birthday to me. Does anyone remember that besides Jim? Yeah. You sang happy birthday, but not to... It was to, wait a minute. My Board of Supervisors member, Brenda Bowman, looked at me and said, it was to another lady. This bald head and this deep voice. I thought I dressed appropriately today, but maybe I didn't. Again, the state of confusion in Pennsylvania County. Jim, I'm sorry I've trusted you for so long now, but I verified and I got nothing. We sang happy birthday. That's your story and you're sticking to it, right? Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I understand you have a theme this year of blazing new trails. Now, Larry Land confused me at first. I thought it was blazing saddles. And I thought, well, I live on a horse farm. I'll bring one of my horses up and I'll punch it, you know, like they did in Blazing Saddles. But then I remembered PETA is aware of everything that goes on today, so I'd probably get in trouble for punching out a horse, right? But it is blazing new trails, yes? Okay, this is the audience participation part of the talk. It is blazing new trails, right? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Have you ever tried to blaze a new trail? Yeah? So, to borrow a line from Dr. Phil, how'd that go for you? How'd that work out? Huh? Yeah. Will Rogers is my favorite philosopher. Will Rogers once said, things aren't the way they used to be and probably never were. Things aren't the way they used to be and probably never were. This past week, I was working with a group of business people from Syracuse, New York, and we met in the Baseball Hall of Fame. It was a rough gig. It's just tough being me sometimes. I love playing baseball. I played as a kid. And so one of the business people were sitting around this expansive eating table there in the Baseball Hall of Fame after I've gone through, and I only had an hour to go through. I really needed a week. And I had an hour to go through, and I snapped my shots, and I sat down. One of the business persons says, Dr. Joe, you obviously love baseball. And I said, yes, I do. Did you play? Yes, I did. Were you any good? And I said, I'm better today at 54 than I was at 17. In my mind, I was a hero. Reality suggests something different. Things aren't the way they used to be and probably never were. We here in Virginia, I believe, stand on the shoulders of some of the greatest ancestors available to anyone in this country. In fact, it's absolutely amazing to me why more people don't move to Virginia. Because you can stand on the shoulders of some wonderful persons who made things the way they are today and who endured and persevered through the way things used to be. And you and I inherit that wonderful legacy from them. Yes? Yes. That wasn't very enthusiastic. Say it like you mean it this time. Yes? Yes. Okay. Tradition, then, the tradition we inherit as Virginians. I want you to think with me as we blaze new trails today about this tradition as the preservation of fire instead of the worship of ashes. Let me say that again so you can get a little soak time, so Coy maybe can understand what I said this time. Tradition is the preservation of fire rather than the worship of ashes. Like myself as a baseball player, I'm better at 54 than I was at 17. Will Rogers says things aren't the way they used to be, probably never were. But what is the fire? What's the fire of the tradition that you bring to your service as a member of your board of supervisors? What's the fire? Not just the worship of ashes, the way we've always done things around here. Because if you've ever tried to blaze a new trail, I promise you, you've heard the words, we ain't never done it that way around here before. Anybody besides me ever heard that? Yeah. Quickly followed by a stare that you just can't back down from, right? Tradition is the preservation of fire as opposed to the worship of ashes. And yet today, in the midst of the fast pace of change that assaults our citizenry and you and me as we serve, it's very, very easy to worship ashes, yes? To talk about the way things used to be, to make the glory days better than they were. When someone starts talking about the good old days, I like to ask questions. What good old days are you talking about? Are you talking about the days before air conditioning? Because I don't want to go back to the northern neck in the days before air conditioning. Do you? No. Oh my God, mosquitoes as big as B-52 bombers coming in your window. Yet you had to have the window open, right? I don't know about you, but if you're talking about the glory days when here in 1776 at the homestead, in January having to go outside to go to the bathroom, I want no part of that. What glory days do you mean? The reality is things aren't the way they used to be, probably never were. So you and I, we serve, understanding that tradition is the preservation of the fire that created the great legacy out of which we govern today, not the worship of those ashes. And you and I as Virginians stand on the shoulders of some mighty fine fire bearers who blaze new trails, don't we? Can we talk about Thomas Jefferson for a moment? He set the world afire with this notion that it's a self-evident truth that every single one of us are created equal. Talk about blazing a new trail. Wow. Talk about we ain't never done it that way before. It was a new day. George Washington left an expansive agricultural production business to lead these fledgling leaders in a revolutionary experiment in democracy. Walked away from his business. You thought you spent a lot of time away from your business to serve your county, right? He walked away from what was a secure future to lead in a revolutionary experiment called democracy. James Madison crafted a document that still guides the way we govern today. Perhaps more than anyone, he crafted this document that guides us in the preservation of fire to prevent anarchy from breaking out. Documents that still exist today have stood the test of time. So we as Virginians, we stand on the shoulders of some mighty fine fire preservers. Yes?
Yes.
Yet the reality is that this is a new day and age in which we set out to blaze trails. The challenges are different. Are they more audacious, more daunting? Perhaps to us. But what can we learn from Tom Jefferson, from George Washington, and James Madison? What did they do to blaze these new trails? They did several things, but I'm convinced that the main thing they did was to push. To push. Now, it's really interesting being an elected leader and finding yourself in a place to push, isn't it? Because you just might want to get reelected, yes? Oh, maybe no. Your term of service has been that challenging, has it? It's different today. In an election year, that might not be a fair question to ask, is it? Especially since you just dissected the whole thing. The reality is we live with it now. So how do we lead and blaze new trails? We push. I like to think of push as an acronym, meaning persevere until success happens. Persevere until success happens. Friends, if we give up and quit, we guarantee the results, yes? But we persevere until success happens, or as I like to say, I'm like an old rusty fishhook. I just hang in there. Jefferson, Washington, Madison, they pushed, they persevered until success happened. And here's the way they did it, and here's the way you and I can do it. Here's the way we can lead our citizenry in our various counties to success. And that is what we want, success, however you define success. First of all, if you're going to push, if you're going to lead out until success happens in your county, you better be prepared for some push back. Anybody ever gotten any pushback when you introduced something new? When you tried to blaze a trail? Oh my God, they call you everything except for your mother's son or your father's daughter, don't they? Yeah, you wonder if you even had parents, right? It's a challenge because they push back and there's this resistance. Why all this resistance? Well, friends, you think you have resistance in your home county? What about Jefferson? What about Washington? What about Madison? They received resistance from the powerhouse of the day. They went to war. That's how committed they were to those ideals and principles that they were pushing. They were determined to persevere until success happened, wrapped around those ideals. Those ideals owned them. Be prepared for resistance. Expect war when you're blazing a new trail. Expect someone to ask you, have you lost your mind? What were you thinking? Oh, wait, you weren't. Resistance is there. You've ever heard keep your friends close and your... Get those resistors up close to you. Find out why they're resisting. They'll cause you to think through what you're pushing at a deeper level and to be able to prepare to communicate with the citizenry at large. Pull those resistors close and listen to them. You see, most of us, by and large, wake up in the morning wanting anything but change. If someone moved your bathroom overnight, you'd be upset. The only persons that I know that wake up in the morning wanting change are infants. They scream for it. They beg for it. They're persistent. They push until you come and change their diaper. But for the rest of us, not so much, right? We want things, what? Status quo? Do you know the actual Latin translation of status quo? What a mess we're in. Status quo. None of us really want change. I'm just like you. I'm just like your citizenry. I'm not particularly enamored with change. In fact, I kind of like the way things have been. I travel a lot, and one particular time when I traveled, it snowed in Pittsylvania County, which is a rather unique occurrence for us as opposed to this part of the world. Honey, my wife of 31 years, For some reason, when it snows, it triggers a need to change things for her. She rearranges furniture. She rearranges the bedroom furniture. She rearranges the kitchen. Now, normally that's not a big deal with me for the kitchen to be rearranged, except one of the keys that I've discovered in being married for 31 years is that you pay attention to little things. One of those little things for honey is making the coffee. Yep, that's right. I make the coffee. In fact, we have his and hers coffee pots. Because she prefers a lesser grade brand of coffee, and I prefer the premium brand, of course, right? That's right. Okay. Starbucks versus Chivaglia. But it's okay. Both are perfectly good, but I prepare her coffee. I walk to my part of the kitchen, which is this little corner where the two coffee makers are, and I have the filters here, the coffee's up here. Gentlemen, you'll appreciate this. I've made an Olympic event out of making coffee. I can prepare 2 full pots of coffee in approximately 3 minutes and 29 seconds. It's my PBR. That's personal best record, not Pabst Blue Ribbon. I just want to specify that with this crowd, right? Okay. So I go and I open the drawer here, and there are the filters. So the first thing I do is I remove the previous filters, put them in one, take them to the trash can, which is approximately 4 steps away. I return, I put fresh filters in, close the drawer. I then reach up in the cabinet, which is strategically located immediately over those 2 coffee pots, and I pull the coffees out. I spoon hers in the exact number of scoops, sir, because taste is everything. Then I pull mine down and I get the grinder down. That's right, I'm a whole bean kind of guy. And I grind my beans and I put mine in, and in 3 minutes and 29 seconds, I prepare 2 full pots of coffee. It's absolutely wonderful. Until one tragic evening, I return home. Fortunately, my key does fit the lock. I return home and go through my process of making coffee. And guess what has happened while I have been gone? It snowed, and honey moved the coffee pots. OMG, as my daughters would say. So I begin looking around the kitchen. I can't find the coffee pots anywhere. They're not in the spot they've always been. I let out a blood-curdling scream. Honey comes running. She says, "What's wrong?" I said, "Somebody broke in our home and stole the coffee pots." She said, "No, they didn't, fool. I moved them right over here." Once again, she's right. I said, "Why did we move the coffee pots?" She said, "Because I wanted to." I said, "Oh, yes, makes perfect sense to me." "Did you move the coffee filters?" "Oh, no." "Did you move the coffee?" "No." "Did you move the trash can?" "Well, of course not." I am no longer an Olympic world record holder in the preparation of coffee. Why? Because things changed while I was gone. Anything changed in your world when you woke up one morning, you went to sleep and you thought everything was fine, and you woke up and change occurred? Friends, if you're blazing a new trail in your county, you're going to have to explain to your citizenry why you did it. I like to think about it like this. Our minds are absolutely brilliant. The good Lord made our minds in such a way that we immediately recognize familiar information. This familiar information is the way we've always done it. We have file folders in our brain. You probably can see through all this hair of mine to see the file folders that exist in my brain. When I saw some of you this morning, I recognized you from last year. You were in a familiar file folder named VACO. Jim Campbell, I recognize as VACO. Unfortunately, I haven't seen Christina's wife yet, but she is in this file folder, actually filed ahead of Jim because I prefer to see her. VACO. What happens when your mind encounters something unfamiliar, when you're blazing a new trail and your citizenry is resistant, when they're pushing back, what are they saying? They're saying to you, "Mr. and Mrs. Board of Supervisors member, I don't recognize what you're saying to me. I need to understand it. I don't have a file folder created for it." Here's the genius of what you can do as a leader in your county who understands how to deal with the pushback. Find the familiar in the unfamiliar. Find the things they recognize. We're accomplishing the same goal. Here are the same steps that we've done before. Will they be different? Yes. In other words, When I got home Friday night, I found in my mailbox from my wonderful Board of Supervisors a real estate reassessment form. Don't you know that's what I wanted to see when I came back home? Immediately my mind went familiar. I've done this before. But there was also that wonderment, didn't I just do this? Didn't it just happen? But yet I recognize the process. I understand the importance of property taxes. I understand that they support my school system, that they support economic development in my county. I understand that importance. That's familiar. But the introduction of something unfamiliar requires that you as my leader build a bridge for me. That you find something familiar in the midst of this change so that I won't be quite so vitriolic in my resistance and I will go, oh yeah. There's something I recognize in this. Thanks for explaining it to me. I understand the wisdom of what you're doing. But if you're gonna lead change, if you're gonna blaze new trails, like Jefferson, Washington, and Madison did, the good news is you stand on their shoulders and you can learn from them. Prepare for pushback, but commit yourself to persevere until success happens. So not only did these excellent ancestors of ours lead out in this change, not only did they blaze new trails by preparing for pushback, but they also, my leading friends, they also prepared for pushback, but they promised to push through. They promised to push through. If your county, if our Commonwealth, if this country and this world desires anything today more than leaders who will make a promise and keep their word, I don't know what it is. People are paying attention. They're listening. They're depending on you when you make a promise to keep it. Now, yes, things change. You make a promise, the landscape changes. It's not that you lied, it's just you're wrong. You understand the difference. One is premeditated. Another is the fast pace of change around us today. When you promise to follow through, you have courage. When you promise to push through, to persevere until success happens, you keep that promise. Even in the midst of the resistance, and you have courage. Courage, my friends, is the moral strength to do what is right in the midst of adversity and mutiny. And yes, mutiny does occur in our counties here in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. It happens. Have you noticed that there's some people who are against everything? You got any citizens like that in your county? Their sole purpose in life is to be against everything. My God, we've got mothers against everything. We've got fathers against everything. We've got Democrats against everything. We've got Republicans against everything. I'm not quite sure what independents are against, but they're against something, right? There are people in your county whose self-definition is, I'm against it. If you talk about raising taxes, I'm against that. If you talk about lowering taxes, I'm against that too. It doesn't really matter the topic. They just define themselves as being against everything. Do you know anybody like that? Don't call their name, please. I know it's on the tip of your tongue. If you were with me last year, you know that I have a pet name for people who are against everything, negative people. I call them Eeyore vampires. You remember Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, Christopher Robin, T.I.W.R. and Piglet, Pooh? They're planning the perfect Christopher Robin play day, kind of like your Board of Supervisors meeting, right? You're planning wonderful play days for the county citizens, right? Yes? And so you find yourself in the midst of all this, and then some citizen, or maybe even one of your fellow board members says, it'll never work. Got anybody like that on your board? No, don't answer that question. You may be sitting aside. Don't twitch, okay? Because they'll know. Hey, I saw that twitch. If it weren't for me, we'd pass anything. I'm against everything. Now, why do I call them Eeyore vampires? Because have you ever noticed that when you get away from a board meeting, sun goes down, or maybe the clock passes midnight in some of your cases, right? That Eeyore turns into a vampire. Now, if they'd stay at the board meeting, it'd be fine, wouldn't it? You could just leave them there, lock the door, walk away, drive home. Your life would be good, wouldn't it, sir? But it's not the way it works, so is it? You're hardly home, and who's with you? Your friendly Eeyore, right? How'd you vote tonight? You voted for what? Now, you know I'm against that. Even if Eeyore doesn't call, where is Eeyore? Eeyore ever get in the back of your head? And you're trying to, if you own a business, you're trying to run your business. If you have a job, you're trying to work. If you don't have a job or own a business, you're probably trying to be with your honey or your grandchildren. You're trying to have a life, right? Who's in the back of your head? The Eeyore. The Eeyore becomes a vampire and starts sucking all the positive time, energy, and attention right out of your mind. Yes? How do you deal with these Eeyore vampires? I'd like to give you today the Dr. Joey two-step so that you can push through. Don't get nervous, sir. I'm not going to ask you to stand up and dance. Okay? All right. Thank you for sitting up front, but I'm sure you don't have any rhythm, so I won't embarrass either of us. Okay? The Dr. Joey two-step consists of this. Back in the 1920s, H.L. Mencken was a newspaper columnist, enjoyed writing, shall we say, controversial columns. Not like anybody you would know or call the name of right now from your home county, right? Okay, so today it's all on email and blogs, right? But back then it was in the newspaper. You remember when people read newspapers actually printed on newsprint instead of looking at their smartphone 150 times a day, right? Okay, so H.L. Mencken wrote this column, and it was a particularly difficult column to read for some people. And so they wrote letters. They wrote letters, so many letters that H.L. Mencken wrote a column back to these Eeyore vampires, and he said something like this: "Dear disgruntled readers, I have received your letters and have them in hand. I am sitting in the smallest room in my home." James, are you with me? You know what the smallest room in your home is? "I received your letters. I'm sitting in the smallest room in my home. Soon your letters will be behind me." You got that, right? Okay. I've just got to keep my chair updated here. We're blazing new trails with James today. So here's the Dr. Joey two-step based on H.L. Mencken's experience. See, that's what you want to say to your constituency, yes? Here's the Dr. Joey two-step. First of all, grab the handle. What do I mean by grab the handle? Learn a lesson. Remember, you're prepared for pushback, right? Yes, you're going to persevere until success happens, but you're going to encounter pushback, and you're prepared for that. But your commitment is that you promise to push through. So what are you going to do? You're going to draw those resistors close, and you're going to listen. Because, friends, we can learn from anyone. We must learn from everyone. Your citizens are engaged in such a way because they want to be heard. That's all some of them want to do, is to be heard. Nobody else listens to them. They have an opinion. At least they're passionate. Okay, they may be wrong to you, but at least they're passionate about what it is that they're doing. Yes? So they want to be heard. We can learn from everyone. Yes, even your vampires. And so we learn from them. Step one, grab the handle. Say that with me. Step one, grab the handle. This time like you mean it. Step one, grab the handle. Step two, flush. Yeah, yes, I know. Sometimes it's multiple flushing. Because the citizenry rises up in large numbers. Yes? Yes, especially when you're trying to blaze a new trail. But remember, you're prepared for the pushback, and you are pushing through this resistance. So you grab the handle, and now what are you flushing? Please remember, it's not personal. Many of them are just delivering the mail to the wrong address. You know what I'm saying? Their lives, some of them, are hard. They've been laid off. They're struggling to pay their bills. Things aren't the way they used to be, you know. Maybe they never were. But today, the economic reality is it's tough. And there's a lot of frustration, a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, not just in your county, and not just in this Commonwealth, but in our world today. They may be delivering the mail to the wrong address. So flush that negativity, that anxiety, that angst. Know that it's not personal. You're a public servant. Yes? John and Jane Q. Public get a little riled up sometimes, don't they? At least they do in Pennsylvania County. Every other county I've ever lived in. Grab the handle, step one. Step two is flush, and just know that it's not personal. What if Tom Jefferson had become so overcome with the anxiety and angst that the monarchy was throwing at him that he'd never written that these truths are self-evident, that every single one of us is created equal? How would your life be different today if he'd capitulated to that? If he'd not stuck by his promise to push through? Mine would be different. What if George had said, enough of this Revolutionary War stuff, I'm going back home. I know how to take care of cattle. Some of you in Augusta County maybe, and other places that raise cattle, you're tempted to do that, yes? But George pushed through. What if Madison had said, nobody's going to read these documents I'm framing anyway. They're probably not going to vote for them. I'm not going to put up with it. But he stayed at the desk and he crafted what prevents anarchy from taking over today. They pushed through. Step one's grab the handle. Step two is flush as you deal with these Eeyore vampires, because you have promised to push through. You have promised to persevere until success happens in your county. How can you do that? Because you're prepared for pushback. So if you're prepared for pushback as you blaze these new trails, my friends, and if you promise to follow through on your promises, then all that leaves is to push forward, yes? To push forward. For you to persevere with courage, to have the moral strength to do the right thing in the midst of adversity and mutiny, to push through, then to push forward. We need leaders today in this world who have that moral courage to push forward, to understand that the actions of today have an implication for tomorrow, that our grandchildren, our unborn grandchildren, have a vested interest in what we can do today to blaze new trails and create a better world for them in which to live. Persevering, though, is very challenging. We oftentimes want to give up and quit, don't we? Does anybody besides me, when you're blazing new trails, just want to give up, quit? Back in the day, we called it take your bat and ball and go home, right? Yeah, it's tempting. It's easy to do. And yet the reality is we need someone to persevere until success happens. Future generations, this generation, you and I, we depend on each other to keep the fire burning, because tradition is the preservation of the fire, not the worship of the ashes. So who's tending the fire? Who's tending the fire? Who's the fire keeper? From Jefferson and Washington, Madison, Monroe, and the list goes on. Who's keeping that fire? Who is it that stands for something instead of against everything? Who is it that has the moral courage to stand up for something and say, I will keep the fire? Especially when the fire is nothing more than a glowing ember mingled among the ashes that others are worshiping. Who is it, my friends, that preserves that fire of tradition? The best of the best from generations that we Virginians inherit today. Who will that be? It's easy to become fatigued when you serve Jane and John Q. Public and you're called everything but your mother's son or your father's daughter, isn't it? We lived in western North Carolina for a time, and it's part of the world that looks a lot like this part of the world, a lot of graceful, beautiful Appalachian mountains. We raised our two daughters there. They were born in Wilmington, North Carolina. We moved to the western part of the state. Being outdoors kinds of people, we would go hiking a lot. As we hiked, our younger daughter, Elizabeth, was about 2 years old. And we're going up this particularly arduous part of the trail, and she says to me, Daddy, carry me. I'm thinking, honey, I'm looking for somebody to carry me. I looked down at her and I stopped for just a moment. I got down on a knee and I said, let me tell you what's about to happen. If you will keep walking with your daddy for a little while longer, you're going to get what we call a second wind. And you're suddenly going to feel more energetic. You're going to feel better. You're going to be so happy that you continue to walk. When, Daddy? It's coming soon. Let's continue to walk. So we did, and we walked. And I put a smile on my face. She smiled back at me, and we walked, and we walked, and we walked. And pretty soon that little 2-year-old looked up at me and said, Daddy, I feel better. Second wind. It's easy in this day and age to want to just look at somebody and say, hey, carry me. The fact is, we have people to carry us. You've had someone to carry you all your life, haven't you? We stand on the shoulders, certainly, of Jefferson, Washington, Madison, and others. But you've had someone carrying you, someone supporting you, encouraging you all of your life. I don't know how to tell you this, but when you first tried to walk, you weren't very good at it. It's nothing personal. But you spent more time on your bottom than you did on your feet. And yet, who was there? If you were a firstborn child, you got a lot of encouragement. If you're the third or fourth-born child, they kept pushing you down because they knew what was about to happen. Nothing would be safe in the home anymore. But if you're that firstborn child, come on, you can do it. Come to Mommy. Come to Daddy. What about when you first rode a bike? Got a few scars today to prove. You kept going, didn't you? Who was there with you? Holding on to the back of that seat, running beside you, hard as he or she could. My old honey has more patience than me, so she taught the girls how to ride their bike. You can do it, and pretty soon you were doing it. You didn't know you were doing it, but you looked back and no one was there. You were doing it by yourself, but it took somebody to get you there, right? What about swimming? Anybody thrown in a cold creek in the early part of spring, but yet somebody was standing right there on the banks, ready to jump in and get you, right? Pull you out. What about the first time you hit a ball or kicked a ball? Somebody to keep tossing that ball to you until you actually hit it. Okay, it was a foul the first time, but you kept swinging until you got your swing perfected. Friends, we have been in a carpool our entire lives. We have had someone encouraging us, calling forth the best in us. So, can we push forward? Yes. Find people to lean on, not necessarily the Eeyore vampires, but find other persons to lean on. Positive people who help you focus on the positive and filter out the negative around you so that you can lead with integrity, with moral courage, and find that high ground above the way the Eeyore vampires want us to lead. Somebody who will be with you as you blaze that trail to take that first step, or find your balance for the first time, or swim for the first time and catch a breath. Someone who will help you lead your county to blaze new trails so that life becomes even better for the citizenry of your county. A group of people who will surround you with the understanding that what we do today matters tomorrow. Stories told about an 83-year-old man who was out on his farm planting a peach tree. You understand the great irony of that. 83 years old, planting a peach tree. Peach trees take years and years to produce edible fruit. His neighbor comes over to him. Hey, old man, what are you doing? Planting a peach tree. Old man, how old are you? I'm 83. Why in the world are you planting a peach tree that you'll never eat from? Because I'll die, go to heaven, with pleasure knowing my grandkids are going to have some delicious peaches. You serve the public so that future generations can have some delicious peaches, yes? Why else would you do it? You don't do it for the money. It may stroke your ego a bit, but it ain't that good. Why do you do it? Why do you? Because you prepare for the push back as you blaze these new trails, because you've promised. You've promised to create a better county government that will serve citizens, to blaze this new trail, and you will push forward. You will persevere until success happens. And on behalf of your unborn grands and great-grands, today I want to thank you for what you're doing to create a better world for them. Push forward, my friends, and may God be with you as you do so. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm not going to get back up on the podium. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Joey.
Jack.
Appreciate it. Enlightening.
Appreciate
It's
it.
time for us to adjourn, and we're going out to our breakout session. So let's go and get ready to go to our breakout. So we are adjourned now. Thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you.